In my opinion, yes. But of course, there are nuances to it. So let's talk about what they are and if you should get a powerlifting coach. What's up, everyone? My name is Rosendo. Welcome back to my channel, and we're back with another video. We are back talking about powerlifting things. I know I said I wanted to make some videos about general fitness for the general population, but I am a powerlifter. I definitely want to talk about some powerlifting things for people getting into the sport, and also I want those videos to be a little bit more touched up, a little bit more consumable for the average person. So it's going to take a while before I get comfortable with the workflow, how exactly I want to approach those videos. So in the meantime, we're talking about powerlifting things, specifically powerlifting coaches today. So today we're going to be talking about powerlifting coaches and if you should get one. If you're new to the sport or if you don't really know much about powerlifting coaching is actually very, very, very common. People don't really just go into the gym and just start lifting weights and all of a sudden make it to, the national championship. They might, of course, if you have really, really good genetics, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about how in powerlifting, it's very common for athletes to follow a program, to have a coach that gives them their program, gives them feedback, instead of, again, just walking into the gym and lifting things and getting stronger that way. Because although you definitely can get stronger that way, and it will vary a lot from person to person, having a coach and having a program is just a huge integral part of powerlifting. So let's talk about powerlifting coaching, how it works, and if you should get a coach. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're a new powerlifter and you probably don't have a coach and are considering getting one. Now, of course, the question becomes, should I get a coach? Do I need a coach? Why or why not? We're going to talk about that today. But first of all, what does a powerlifting coach even do? Now, if you're very new to the sport, a coach will be absolutely important to help you know good technique, to help you learn the ins and outs of each lift, and to really help you develop your technique to a really, really advanced and proficient way. Because believe it or not, there are a lot of subtle things that go into the technique of each lift, whether it be squat, bench, or deadlift, that a coach will definitely help you develop. But that's not the main reason to get a coach, because technique is something that you will A, always be working on, but B, the main pillars of technique can be set, within a few weeks to a few months. You'll always be improving, but the pillars and the foundation, they get set pretty quickly. It won't take you that long to have half decent technique, and you'll just improve on those pillars over time. The main reason to get a powerlifting coach is to have a program written for you, because powerlifting programming is kind of a beast in and of itself. I actually find it very fascinating. There's all sorts of things you need to take into consideration. And again, it's not as simple as just going into the gym and lifting heavy things. Granted, that approach can work for a while or maybe even a long time. And we're going to talk about when you might be able to stick with that approach or when it might be time to get a coach. But the point is, again, there's a lot more to powerlifting than just going into the gym and maxing out, or going to the gym and just lifting heavy weights and getting stronger over time, or going into the gym and still improving on your squat, bench, and deadlift, but without a dedicated structure to your program and your training. So the main reasons to get a powerlifting coach would be to have a fixed powerlifting program set for you. And it would be one you want to follow pretty seriously. It's going to have what you do on each day, what weight to use, maybe not exactly what weight to use. I know some coaches prefer an RPE-based program, which if you don't know what that is, you'll learn what it is if you get a coach that prefers that method. But the point is, you'll have a dedicated program written for you that will help you get 100% out of your training instead of just going into the gym, lifting heavy things, and maybe only getting 70 or 80% out of your training. Now, in my personal opinion, that is the main reason to get a coach. But there are a lot of other reasons why you might want a coach. For example, developing proficiency in your lifts, as we've talked about. Number two, a lot of people really like the accountability of coaches, right? It's someone that tells you, hey, you need to be on point, you should do this, you should do that, and kind of keeps you accountable if you're not a really disciplined person on your own. And number three, of course, just to have someone there, someone to support you, someone who can answer any powerlifting questions you have. They keep up with the sport. It's their job to know the rule book. It's their job to prepare you for competitions, to make sure you're lifting to standard, doing all the things that are pretty much required of all coaches in any sport. So there are plenty of reasons to get a coach. It really just depends on person to person. But in my opinion, having a dedicated program specific to you that takes all the guesswork out of training, that helps you get 100% out of your training, is the biggest reason to get a coach. Now, the question becomes, should you get a powerlifting coach? Let's talk about that. Now, at the end of the day, this is an opinion-based video, and my opinion is yes, you should get a powerlifting coach. This doesn't apply in all cases, but for the most part, if you're a powerlifter, if you plan on competing, I think it's a good idea to get a powerlifting coach. Now, again, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're on the fence. I'm assuming you want to learn a little bit more about coaching. So let's talk about scenarios where you should get a coach and where you might want to wait a little bit longer. Now, let's start with the obvious. Number one, getting a powerlifting coach is a financial investment. Coaches can charge anywhere from $100 to $200 to over $200 a month. So it absolutely is a financial investment that you need to take into consideration. Now that is up to you personally to decide whether or not it is worth it. Everyone's situation is different, so that's not something that we will discuss today because that is strictly a matter of your individual circumstances. And if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you already have that information, you're already taking that into consideration, and now you want more information to decide if that investment will be worth it. So that being said, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the reasons why I think having a powerlifting coach is a good idea, including all of the ones I already mentioned, and I'll talk about when you might want to hold off. Because as I mentioned, getting 100% out of your training, I think is very, very important. If you're going to be spending a lot of time in the gym, I mean, some people are in the gym in and out, some people are in the gym for hours at a time. Me personally, I'm kind of on the 2.5 hour range. I know some people who are there for an hour and a half, maybe two. Some people who are there might be there for 3.5 or 4 hours, although that's probably pushing it. But the point is, if you're serious about powerlifting, if you're already willing and dedicated to putting in that much time in the gym, I think it's absolutely important to get 100% out of your training and to be training for a purpose. You're training as a powerlifter for powerlifting reasons, to get your squat, bench, and deadlift up, to get your total up. So it would make sense to have a dedicated program that helps you achieve those goals instead of leaving gains on the table and not being able to get 100% out of all the time you spend in the gym. Again, there's a lot of subtleties and nuances that go into periodization. I'm sure the coaches might think that it's a lot less nuanced than we might think, but again, having everything written out for you, maybe even your warm-ups, but let's say your lifts, your squat, your bench and deadlift, your primary work, your secondary work, any tertiary work, what days you need to work out on, what weights to use, how many reps to do, how many sets to do, what accessory exercises to do with how much weight and how many reps over how many days is all written out for you. And I think it's a game changer, really. It absolutely kind of took my training to another level. But more than that, it helped me train with the intention of powerlifting, with the intention of putting on strength on my squat, bench, and deadlift, and to get the most out of my training. So again, if you're serious about powerlifting, if you're serious about getting the most out of your squat, bench, and deadlift, I think it's a good idea to get a coach. Now, when might it be a good idea to hold off? Because if you're still new to the sport, if you don't know if it's right for you, if you kind of want to hold off before you invest in a coach, because at the end of the day, not only is a coach an investment, but it's also a commitment. Of course, you're not absolutely forced to stick with a coach if you don't like them or if you want to try someone new. But for the most part, it is a commitment to an individual that you are making that shows that you're serious, that shows that you're dedicated, and that you're willing to put in the work. And you probably want to think it twice before you commit to an individual. So if you're new to powerlifting, if you're training on your own and you're still putting up numbers in your squat, bench, and deadlift because you're new, that's pretty common. Or if you're just not ready for the investment or the commitment, it might be a good idea to hold off on getting a coach. Now, in my opinion, if you were to ask me where I draw the line, I think I would draw the line in competing. I think signing up for a meet is probably the line where if you're planning on doing a meet, I think it's a good idea to get a coach. If you're not planning on doing a meet, you might not need a coach after all. Because again, in my opinion, that's kind of the line of, okay, you're taking the sport seriously, you want to compete, you want to do your best. It might be a good idea to have some guidance to help you do your best. But again, it's really all about intention and dedication to the sport. If you just enjoy powerlifting for fun, if you're new to the sport and you don't really have any intentions of taking it super seriously, then you might not need a coach. And my recommendation to you would be, hey, you probably shouldn't get a coach. If you want one, go ahead, but you probably don't need one. And as long as you're doing fine on your own, then why get a coach in the first place? But if you're thinking about taking powerlifting seriously, you want to get the most out of your training, and you see yourself doing the sport for the long term, I think it's a good idea to get a coach. So me personally, I would draw the line on, if you plan on competing, I would get a coach. If you don't plan on competing, you can hold off. Again, there are always nuances. You should always evaluate everything on a case-by-case basis. If you know what type of person you are and you don't know if you're going to fully commit to powerlifting, it might even be a good idea to do a meet on your own and see if you want to keep going from there. It might just be the case that you do your first meet and you learn it's not for you, or you do your first meet, you like it, you had fun, but you don't plan on pursuing powerlifting too seriously in the future, so you might not need a coach. So again, there are always nuances. Evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. But if you plan on taking the sport seriously and more or less doing a meet or planning on doing more meets in the future is where that line might be, I think you should get a powerlifting coach. So there's my recommendation to you. Real quick for the end, I just want to talk about my experience in powerlifting and my experience with a coach and why I think it helped me get the most out of my training, starting with me programming by myself in the end of 2023. So I started my serious powerlifting training at the end of 2023. That's when I joined a powerlifting gym. That's when I made a program for myself that revolved solely around my squat, bench, and deadlift. And that's when I had the intention of wanting to do a meet at one point, which I did at the end of 2024. Now, all that time I was programming my workouts on my own. If you saw my GZCL breakdown video, you know exactly how I did that. And I ended up doing a meet at the end of 2024, about a year since I started my own program, and it went all right. I was able to make some good progress, add some good numbers to my lift, but more importantly, I did that all by myself without a coach. After my first meet, I considered that my benchmark, And that's when I decided to get a coach, because I knew I would pursue powerlifting seriously for the long term, and I wanted to be able to get the most out of my training. So after that, I got a powerlifting coach. I've been with that coach for a little under a year now. Things have been going great. This is not a video of me recommending my powerlifting coach. This is just a video of me talking about my experience with the coach. But the reason I bring this up is because I want to share my perspective as someone who didn't get a coach going into their first meet and got one after. Because I really wasn't able to get 100% out of my training going into my first meet, and I really wasn't able to put up my best performance at my first meet. I'm pretty satisfied with my performance. That's mostly because I did all my programming on my own, and it was my first meet, so there's nothing really to be disappointed about, because A, you have no meets to compare it to, but B, you're just learning. You're dipping your toe in the sport. You're doing your first meet just to do your first meet and to kind of get an idea of how it would go to set you up for future meets. Now, in hindsight, if I could go back in time, I actually think it would have been a good idea to have a coach leading into that meet. For the year that I was training and programming for myself, I think it would have been a smart idea to have a coach. I would have been able to get a lot more out of my training. Although to that, I do need to add, again, I know myself as a person. I knew I would take powerlifting pretty seriously, and I knew that I would pursue it in the long term. Knowing that, I can say it would have been a good idea to have a coach. But everyone's different. Not everyone knows that they're going to pursue the sport for the long term. Not everyone wants to pursue the sport in the long term. And some people just want to do a meet just to try out a meet. In that case, you might not want a coach going into your first meet. But again, I was taking it pretty seriously going into my first meet. I think it would have been a good idea to have a coach, but I don't really regret anything. I learned a lot about myself as a lifter. That's probably the most valuable thing I got out of myself, out of programming for myself, is that I learned a lot about myself. And at least now, after my first meet, I can get 100% out of my training now that I'm with a coach. In hindsight, I could have done a lot better had I had a coach back then, and I knew myself, so I think it would have been a good idea because I knew I would be committed to the sport. So that's what I base my advice off of. But everything kind of worked out, and I have a coach now, and I definitely will continue to have a coach for the future. So there you go. That's my experience, that's my opinion, and that's my advice to you on whether or not you should get a powerlifting coach. Now, other than that, I don't have a lot or really any experience working with multiple coaches or getting to know how different coaches do things, so I can't really give you much advice on that side of things. If there are any coaches watching this video, I'd love for you guys to share in the comments if you guys do anything different, if you guys do anything unique, how you go about programming for your athletes, and give me any advice or any advice to anyone who might be looking and considering getting a coach. Now, if you're wondering, okay, I think I will get a coach, where do I begin? Where do I look for one? Again, it's outside of my area of expertise because I've only ever worked with one coach. I can only give you basic pieces of advice like A, do your research. Always do your research. See how much coaches are charging, see what they offer for their clients, see what they've done for their athletes. But the only real piece of advice that I can give, that I will give, is always start local, right? That's probably the best place you can start, because if you know powerlifters personally, chances are they all have a coach, and you could always ask them, hey, how's your coach? Well, coaches in the area do you know? How's your experience with your coach? So if you're considering getting a coach, my experience is just start local and go from there. If you go to a powerlifting gym, your job is easy. If you don't, see if there are any powerlifting gyms in your area or if there are any powerlifters in your area, and just start talking to them. That's actually what I did when I was looking for a coach. I knew I wanted to go local, and that's a whole other thing on whether or not you should get a local coach or a non-local coach, one that's online. There are advantages to having a local coach, but you might have more options if you don't go local. But the point is, that's pretty much how I did it. I was going to a powerlifting gym, but I did not have a coach, so I would just talk to the powerlifters I know, ask them who their coach is, ask them if they liked working with them and what the experience was working with them. And over time, I just gathered a few names, kind of looked into each one, and ultimately decided on a local coach in my area. So again, always do your research, but if you have no clue where to start, I would start local and go from there. All right, but that is about it. That is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments and I will answer them as best as I can. I would love to answer any questions and give you guys my pieces of advice. But again, just keep in mind, I've only ever worked with one coach, so I don't have a lot of experience on how other coaches may do things, or I don't even know if other coaches might do things differently. I know a few things. I do keep up with, some lifters on social media, but for the most part, I only have experience personally working with one coach who has helped me make tremendous gains on my lifts. But again, if you guys have any questions about coaching, about powerlifting, about competing, or anything, leave them in the comments. We can all help out. If there are other powerlifters watching this video who have their own coaches, again, if there are coaches watching this video, definitely leave your thoughts and experiences. And if you guys have any specific way of doing things in the comments so we can all learn, I want this channel to be a place of discussion where we can all talk about things, all things fitness for all demographics. So if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But other than that, that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.